Question number 1. Enumerate the procedure in disassembling the air compressor. First step, detach the pipes after draining cooling water. Remove the cylinder head. Next, pull the outer ring out because it may be stuck to cylinder head. Remove the low pressure valve and remove the crankcase cover. Then dismount the crank pin bolt. Dismount the bearing and pull out the piston. Next, dismount the drain separator. Remove the high pressure suction valve. Remove the first stage cooler and remove the high pressure discharge valve. And lastly, remove the second stage cooler. Question number 2. Enumerate the precaution in assembling the air compressor. First step, fasten the crank bolt. Use torque wrench to fasten part with prescribed torque. Next, replace packing when overhauling. There are similar packings, so mount them in their correct positions. And pay attention to the valve guard, pinhole, and knock pin position. Confirm the condition of the low pressure and high pressure valve, plate valve, and their elasticity. Question number 3. Enumerate how the air compresses inside the compressor. First, when the piston is in downstroke, the outside air is down into the upper part of the cylinder via a suction filter and through the suction valve provided at the center of the low pressure valve. Then the air is compressed as the piston goes out, passing through the discharge valve in the periphery of the low pressure valve after the air discharge outside of the cylinder and then cooled by the first stage cooler. Next, drainage is discharged by the drain separator. This process allows the air to be drawn into the bottom part of the cylinder from suction side of the high pressure valve. Then next, the air thus sucked in is again compressed by the piston, descent, and it's delivered to the discharge side of the high pressure valve. It is cooled by the second stage cooler, goes via check valve, and is pressure fed to the air compressed reservoir. Question number 4. Enumerate the process how cooling water cools down the compressed air. Cooling water is fed to cool the air, the temperature of which has risen due to compression. Next, cooling water which is supplied by the cooling water pump connected to the compressor shaft or by the cylinder block and is discharged from the pipe in the upper part of the cylinder head. While passing through the cylinder blocks, cooling water cools the first and second cooler as well as cylinder at the same time. Question number 5. Explain how lubricating oil does its function in the air compressor. So, lubricating oil sent to the bearings and pistons, pin parts connected to the air compressor shaft to lubricate the cylinder inside the lubricator, feeds oil through the lubricating oil, pour out into the piston low pressure side from one place each on both sides of the cylinder system oil. Splash lubrication is used for the high pressure side. It is recommended to replace the lubricator when the oil is inspected and the oil check valve is replaced every 800 hours of operation. This is from the Type S company. Question number 1. Enumerate the procedure in disassembling the air compressor. The first step is open the crankcase over after draining the cooling water. Then remove the crank pin bolts. Remove the bearing, remove the valve cover and take out the low pressure valve. Next, detach the high pressure valve cover and take out the high pressure discharge and suction valves. The high pressure valve, suction, and discharging valves are not arranged in a straight line set. Each is fitted using a cover of its own. Then detach the cylinder cover together with the air inlet and the upper part of the intercooler. Next, pull out the piston. And lastly, overhaul the intercooler and aftercooler. Question number 2. Enumerate the features or company S model. Of company S model. First, the low pressure valve can be overhauled without removing the cylinder cover. The intercooler and aftercooler are fitted on a case body block independent of the cylinder block. The lower part of each cooler makes a drain separator and then oil for the cylinder inside is supplied from an independent dedicated tank via a lubricator attached to the tip of the yellow pump. And the crankshaft rotates the pump worm shaft, which in turn delivers the oil to the plunger mesh with the worm shaft. The oil is poured via the oil signal into the cylinder inside through an oiling hole, and air flows from suction feeder via the low pressure suction valve to the upper part of the cylinder to have undergoes compression in good from the low pressure discharge valve to intercooler with drainage resolved in its lower part. And after going through the high pressure suction valve, the air drawn into the cylinder provided in the lower part of the low pressure piston for compression and via the high pressure discharge valve to the aftercooler. And drainage is removed in the drain separator in the lower part of the aftercooler. Then the air goes via a check value to be finally feed into the air tank gauges, display pressure and temperature as the separator goes in. Cooling water is supplied with cooling water is supplied by the cooling water pump or the auxiliary machinery cooling water line to cool the intercooler in the first step. Then the water cools the compressed high temperature air and remove drainage. This process in working to reduce emulsification of lubricating oil. After leaving the intercooler, the cooling water cools the aftercooler, then the cylinder block before being discharged from the from the head of the air compressor. Question number. State the purpose of cooling water in the air compressor. Confirm the amount of lubricating oil in the crankcase and shaft for cylinder lubrication. Smaller air compressor have no cylinder inlet. Lubricate the upper part of the cylinder with oil. Question number 4. Enumerate the common problem in the compressor. First, malfunction of or damage the low pressure valve. Malfunction of or damage the low pressure valve. Malfunction or damage the high pressure suction and discharge valve. Breakage of the piston ring. Damage to the pistons. Damage to the first stage cooler, intercooler or second stage valve aftercooler. Number 5. Enumerate the 5 safety precautions in operating the compressor. The first, check oil amount, tank and cylinder lubricating tank. Cylinder lubricating oil flow. discoloration or emulsification of crankcase lubricating oil. Then confirm cooling water flow. Inspect and clear high and low pressure valves. Abnormal sound inside cylinders. And that's it.